The Newsday continues here on One News Now Business. I'm Diego Castro. Here are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate fronts. Analysts see the Bangko Sentral extending its rate pause until the end of the year. Analysts say that the central bank is unlikely to tighten its policy again this year. However, further tightening by the U.S. Federal Reserve may prompt the BSP to resume its tightening cycle. Former BSP Governor Felipe Medallas says the Monetary Board would be in a tough spot if the peso depreciates due to higher borrowing costs in the U.S. He also warned that too much peso depreciation may cause a backlash on prices and wages. Meanwhile, the Bangko Sentral intends to further reduce the amount of cash that banks must have in reserve. However, BSP Governor Eli Remolona says they are still undecided on when to implement the cuts while the BSP is in tightening mode. Analysts say that the central bank may have to wait until inflation eases into the 2 to 4% target range before adjusting the reserve requirement ratio or RRR. Finance Chief Ben Jokno says free access to state university education is, quote, unsustainable. Jokno reiterates his opposition to the universal access to the Quality Tertiary Education Act of 2017. Jokno deems the law anti-poor because, quote, there are more poor people who do not attend college. He says the law serves more as a subsidy to those who can pay for their college education. The finance chief suggests enhancing basic education if the government truly aims to help the poor. Jokno also notes that if a fixed number of students enters SUCs and benefit from the free tuition fee, funding for the law's entitlements would be adequate. To give his insights on that bit of news, we have with us on the show Sir Vic Paqueo, a visiting fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Good morning po.
Yes, in the last report, sir, Secretary Jokno called the free tuition law unsustainable and anti-poor. What is your thought on this?
I agree with him.
Okay.
And I think the reason for saying it's unsustainable is essentially that its goal of massification to achieve universal education is essentially unrealistic given the country's financial constraints. In fact, I would say that I would go further than Secretary Jokno and say that the current free education law fosters inefficient use of resources. On this point, continued massification of policy without reforming its objectives of a college education for all, without modifying the design, finance, and implementation of the law is likely to adversely affect the ability of the country to achieve opportunely other urgent education and socioeconomic goals, particularly goals pertaining to improving the welfare of the poor. These goals include critical improvements in basic education quality, faster reduction in learning poverty, better child health and nutrition, which is very important for the learning of children, and faster acquisition of work skills of children who drop out of school early on before completing high school. By the way, the recent experience of economically advanced countries like Germany and the US to push for universal education, called for in the US, for example, by Senator Bernie Sanders, has turned out to be unsustainable. And by the way, our political leaders have taken that as a model, but I think we need to rethink that.
Yes. Sir, what would be the impact then on our economy? And how about on the state universities and college themselves?
Well, first of all, let me just be clear that to avoid misunderstanding, it is important for the country both public and private
Mhm.
sectors to invest in the expansion of higher education,
Okay.
uh, uh, the number of graduates, and uh, uh, ratchet up the quality of their higher education experience. That's
Mhm.
really critical for the country to have the capacity to produce top level expertise and informed leaders, given the centrality of innovations based on advances in science and technology, particularly in the era or the age of the emerging age of the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay, okay. And then, sir, what amendments then are needed to make this law fiscally sustainable?
Um, okay, so in view of various considerations, which I would like to expand if you would allow me a little bit,
Okay.
uh, is that I believe that a policy that calls for um, that calls for the um, the universal access, uh, untargeted use of resources
Mm-hmm.
to enable students
Okay.
uh, uh, can result in a wastage
Okay.
of resources, both in terms of the time of the students and government resources.
Yes.
And the reason why is that not all many students are unprepared to go to college or to do well in and benefit from college education because they are unprepared.
Yes.
Either they don't have talent, or if they have talent, they are not simply not ready, or they are unprepared to do serious work at the college level because of the poor quality of education,
Yes.
uh, particularly fundamental education, that characterize our education system currently. In fact, our education system currently, in terms of learning achievements, are really in crisis.
Okay, but sir, the question is then for the meantime or for now, what could be done to make sure that the law
Uh,
would strictly
so
benefit the poor?
here are my suggestions for
Yes,
consideration
yes. Go ahead, sir.
of government. One is the adoption of what we call socialized tuition-free uh, um, subsidy, or
Mm.
yeah, tuition-free access to HUCs, or the state colleges and universities. Um, that means that those who can afford it, who are well off, should pay some amount, a fraction of the cost
Okay.
of the college education, running providing college education. Now, so second, amendment of the current Universal Access to Quality Education Act,
Mm-hmm.
RA 10931. Third, review of the design and implementation of the tertiary education subsidy, or the TES. Fourth, implementation and funding of the Unifast law uh, as envisioned in the
Mm-hmm.
Unified Assistance System for Tertiary Education Act of 2015, or RA 10687. Now, uh, if you recall, this was the law that kind of provided a coordinated
Mm-hmm.
and a much more efficient way of providing targeted uh, scholarships or grants and aid to students that are deemed ready or have the gift and talents to go to college.
Yes, yes, yes.
Uh, and this was actually approved with the support of uh, um, the various secretaries of the economic secretaries, including Dr. Diokno. And this was superseded by the current Act, Republic Act RA 10931, which is this Universal Access to Quality Education Act. So, and I think we need to look at this and revise it so that it becomes more sustainable and at the same time more efficient in the development or the financing of access to higher education.
Yes, and to make sure that this really goes to those who deserve it. Well, unfortunately, sir, that's all the time we have. But thank you very much for joining us this morning. Sir Vic Paqueo, a visiting fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Diego Castro. Some business groups are concerned that the suspension of reclamation projects in Manila Bay may deter potential investments in the country. President Bongbong Marcos had halted most reclamation projects earlier this month to assess their environmental impact. But so far, no review timeline has been released. Because of this, business leaders say that they are worried about the country's inconsistent policies. They also noted that this could drive foreign investors to choose other countries like Vietnam or Thailand. They also believe that these projects could have expanded Manila and Pasay, stabilizing land prices and making it more affordable. And those are the top business stories of the hour. I'm Diego Castro. Join us again at 2 p.m. We are One News. The FIBA World Cup starts August 25. Support Gilas. Support Team Pilipinas. Watch and buy tickets to the biggest sports event of the year.